What's going on, people? Happy Sunday. Happy Super Bowl Sunday, specifically. Go Seahawks, go Patriots.
Yes, go Seahawks.
Yeah. I know everybody's on their hate the Patriots term, but guess what? The Patriots.
No, I just have money on the Seahawks.
Oh, I see. So the Kalshi got you. You're on the sports.
No, we don't have Kalshi here, but
okay. But you have your own sites. Got it.
Yeah.
All right, but we're not here to talk about the Super Bowl. That's tomorrow's podcast. We'll be recapping the big game and everything that happened there and all the movie trailers that we got during it. That's going to be very interesting, especially since famously no Marvel trailer. So that's going to be very interesting to witness. But we're here to talk about Lost today, season 4, episode 3, The Economist, or as I call it, Sayid's James Bond adventure post getting off the island, because we have now 4 confirmed members of the Oceanic Six. We have Hurley, we have Kate, we have Jack, and now we have Sayid, who, like I said, we get to follow a fun little adventure. So before we actually get into breaking down this episode, there's one of 2 ways in which we can do this. We can recap the plot linearly, or we can kind of basically just dive right into it and discuss kind of how the events of the show are kind of now revolving around this shadow organization that seems to be not playing different sides against the other, but seems to be obviously manipulating, the behind the scenes thing. I famously said that, like, this era of Lost in 2008 specifically, because this wasn't really there in the first 3 seasons, but this era of Lost specifically this season is really, really heavily influenced by that. And like I said, you saw the ripple effect of that across a bunch of different shows. Prison Break did this, Heroes did this idea of this obsession of this like kind of clandestine shadow organization that seems to be independent of all main governing bodies. And the thing
pretty sure the 100 did this like every season.
There you go. Exactly. It's the 100, probably the most infamous of the Lost imitators that you saw going into this show. Kind of all of that dovetails together in order to form this kind of, I would say, what really helped in order to, continue to further the mystery and the investment of the show. Obviously, it started with the transition from the flashbacks to the flash forwards. Then you have these new characters that are here to investigate the island. And now you kind of, what I find interesting as well is, after the first episode, which is setting up the threat of the freighter and kind of, the immediate after effects of everything after Charlie's heroic sacrifice, then you have episode 2, which introduces, the freighter crew, the Science 4, as I call them. And now you have this episode, which is basically all kind of revolved around Sayid. And I find it interesting because I would say that this might be, of all the Sayid-focused episodes that we've gotten so far in the show, this is easily my favorite, because Sayid has been set up as this tragic figure. They're kind of, living weapon. He's kind of the guy. Him and Sawyer have always kind of been, the guys that do what no one else is willing to do. Although, and where he is, Sawyer is more conflicted now. And it's funny because Sawyer also gets a little bit of like an interesting moment in this episode as well. Sayid is always the guy that, while he may be conflicted, he doesn't show it. And what I find interesting is, now that we've gotten past like Sayid's tragic backstory, you get to really focus on him in this episode as this very interesting epicenter between the polar opposites that are Jack and Locke, who are these 2 kind of pillars of the show that are both, at this point, they're, for lack of a better word, they're the Professor X and Magneto of the show, where they are both so locked into their own individual corners. Locke wanted to stay on the island and protect it from outside forces at all costs, and that anybody who comes to the island from here on out is a threat and wants to do it harm, versus Jack, who is so hell-bent on getting them rescued that he's willing to possibly put them, in harm's way. And that's kind of seen in this episode, where Jack is kind of realizing, and Sayid as well, is kind of realizing that, maybe these people from the boat are not who they say they are, which I don't know why that should come across as a mystery, considering that Daniel told him in the last episode, yeah, coming to this island and rescuing you was maybe not exactly our top priority. And now you have Sayid, who is kind of now acting as this like intermediary between the 2, where he also obviously wants to get them rescued, but he's also very highly skeptical of the boat crew, and also, sees where Locke is coming from, but also, unlike both Locke and Jack, is willing to do the thing that kind of none of them were willing to do, which is, he's like, okay, we know we have this boat, this freighter off the shore of the island. We now have a helicopter in order to get to it, but we don't know anything about these boat people. So why don't we go to the boat itself and maybe get some answers? And that also, like I said, is part of, the structure of the show now, given that this is the writer's strike season. This is the shortest season of the show. We're past the first 3 seasons. Things are moving at rapid fire pace. Like I said, we just got these new 4 on the island. Now the episode ends with Lapidus taking off with both Sayid and Desmond and Naomi's body on the pilot. We're heading to the freighter. We're going to find out, possibly in the next 2 episodes or so, what the hell is going on. So, but like I said, so you were not as big a fan of this episode as I was. I really, really enjoyed this episode.
Yeah, I guess it's that syndrome of where it's heading. It's kind of like season 5 of Breaking Bad. It's the best season, but it doesn't start off as like the absolute heater it becomes. Like if you know what's gonna happen, if you're watching it with someone, like, hey, we gotta pay attention to all of this. But yeah, I'm feeling it ramp up. The seeds are being planted. It's very much more like who is gonna side with who's gonna betray who. That kind of dynamic now. It's not as much as one side and the other. It's very merged. So that's interesting. Like I said, it's the Survivor Civil War season, if you will.
I was worried when I initially watched this season back in 2019 because, like I said, I took a long gap in between getting back into the show because, like I said, I watched Stranger in a Strange Land in college. It was one of the worst. It was the worst episode of the show. I took literally an almost too long year break, came back, managed to get my way through the rest of season 3. The last of the, like I said, we all knew this. The last 4 episodes of season 3 is an absolute heater run. And I remember getting into season 4, and I'm like, oh no, like, are we back to the whole Jack versus Locke thing? I'm like, that was fine in season 2, but now it's like, oh, they're actually like opposed to each other. Are we going to see like these, like the survivors fighting it out instead of like figuring out? Thankfully, that's not where it went, because thankfully you still have characters like Sayid who are there to, keep the peace. And then we're also following Sayid's flash forward in this season, where unlike Jack and Hurley's flash forwards that we were watching in the last couple, Hurley seems to just want to avoid even acknowledging that everything that happened on the island happened, and Jack just wanted to move on. Sayid seems to be the only one who still seems tied in with whatever the hell is going on, where he seems to be actively hunting down members of whoever the shadow organization is that that seem to be responsible for sending the freighter crew. At least we can make those assumptions. Like I said, you had the Matthew Abaddon character in the last 2 episodes. He was shown to be, like I said, kind of connected to 2 timelines, where he's shown in the second episode, being Naomi's boss in order to help recruit the boat crew. And then in the first episode, he's seen visiting Hurley, which we know takes place after after they get off the island. So he seems to be the one figure that's connecting the 2 storylines. And while he's not in this episode, we can assume, obviously, given, what Sayid is doing in the flash forwards, that it's his organization that Sayid is killing members of. And that leads to an interesting episode. What did you think of Sayid's flash forward in this episode?
Yeah, I was like, am I watching Lost, or am I watching like a Pierce Brosnan era Bond movie? Like there it would have been like what Casino Royale would have been out like.
Well, this is 2008,
or,
so yeah.
Or Quantum of Solace is
Quantum
coming
of Solace here. See, yeah. I'm thinking I'm still in my Bourne era, because Bourne Ultimatum was a year before this, and like that's my pinnacle for like 2000 spy action.
Yeah, but again, it's still like a little too cryptic of like, oh, there's shadow organization. What do they do? I don't know, but they're a shadow organization that's pulling all the strings. So we just have to keep watching there. We get this like. Again, it's a very Bond story. It's a Bond girl with like literally a bit of a more tragic.
Girl, then she shoots him. Yes.
Yeah, it's a bit more tragic twist than the typical Bond girl, but it's still like, okay, this is what Lost is also now, apparently, because Lost is clearly that it's not one thing.
Lost is everything. Lost is Lost. You want to talk about literally? Lost is not just contained inside of a box. Lost broke outside of the box and then destroyed the box, and that is now stamping on its remains in order to prove that it is not going to be classified as one kind of a show. Like I said, it was a survivor show. It was a supernatural show. It was a mystery thriller show. It's a sci-fi show.
Now it's about to be a super sci-fi show,
and now it's about to be super sci-fi, as is proved by what Daniel does in this episode as well.
I want to say like one more thing about Sayid, because Sayid, like he's like not secretly, but like not obviously been like a pillar of the show, because I think Jack and Locke are like the most developing characters. Like they're gonna change the most from the pilot to the last episode. That's what and Sawyer kind of also, at least. In the second half of season 3, but Sayid, I don't think he's changed at all.
He's the weapon,
and it's perfect because
he is the Captain America. He is consistent. He is staying to that line.
He sees through everyone's bullshit, and he doesn't let anyone see through him. And
exactly.
It's so perfect.
And it's perfect. It helps obviously with his backstory. Coming from Iraq as a torturer, the fact that he saw the worst of the worst in humanity, and so that makes him the most well-equipped to be the guy who sniffs through everybody's lies. Like I said, he was a professional interrogator. You see it when he's interrogating Miles, when they're on their way to the barracks in order to speak with Locke. And again, it shows that like he is a mastermind, where he was always clearly planning on trading Miles for Charlotte ultimately when he makes that deal with the Lapidus in the beginning of the episode. But I digress. Like I said, I'll save the twist ending for the end, obviously.
I feel
But
like it couldn't have been anyone else when it was. I'm like,
it
of
couldn't have been
course.
anyone else. Of course. I mean, it's they kept it a little bit quiet on the phone. So basically, I guess in order to kind of like recap, so basically in the flash forward, it starts off Sayid's playing golf in the Seychelles. He comes across a businessman. They exchange friendly banter before Sayid reveals he's one of the Oceanic Six and kills him. The businessman has a slight look of worry on his face. Then he's in Germany. He's seducing the assistant of some other wealthy businessman before calling a secret unknown. Someone on a burner phone telling him he's made contact. He meets his date at her place. They talk. They have what's it called? They make pillow talk. She's almost about to leave the burner. He goes to take it with him. Later on, they're in bed. He tells her, she's asking him about his job. She goes to answer a message from her boss. Sayid tells her to get out of Germany, because of course he's trying to, because he's of course thinking of Nadia and, trying to continue to protect the innocent, but it turns out she's in on it. She ends up pulling out a gun, shoots him. He ends up shooting her out of self-defense. Basically it's, so I don't know if like her boss was ever even a thing or if like it was always just a cover in order to get to her, but irregardless, it leads to obviously the twist ending, which I'll get to, but then we're back on the island. And so a couple things that are happening here. Basically, Sayid essentially concocts this big plan, while Jack and Miles are arguing in the background because, of course, Miles immediately wants to go after when he finds out that Ben is with Locke's group, and he seems to be like, yeah, it seems like all of our problems are intertwined with Locke. He shot Naomi. Now he's got Charlotte. We're after Ben. He's got Ben. Why don't we just go after him? And Jack is like, you haven't been on this island. You don't know Locke that well. It's never going to be that simple. So Sayid, of course, comes up with a very simple solution. He's like, look, all of this is irrelevant because we need to get to that goddamn boat and find out what the hell is going on there. Because the sooner we get on that boat, we'll find out who these people are and whether they're telling the truth or what their real intentions are. So basically, Sayid makes a deal with Frank. He's like, look, if I can get Charlotte back here without bloodshed, will you take me and maybe one other person to the freighter? Frank agrees. So then also the other big thing is that Sayid discovers that while Naomi was clearly lying about having been hired by Penny, she is still carrying a picture of Desmond and Penny. So she's like, okay, so he wasn't hired. We know for a fact that they weren't hired by Penny, but she still got a picture of Desmond and Penny on them. So he sends Juliet to the beach in order to get Desmond because like Desmond might know something about this that we may not. He's like, I'm going to go with Miles. We're going to go follow Locke's group. We're going to get Charlotte back. Jack sends Kate with them. There's another funny little bit of banter there where it's like, yeah, I don't necessarily know if I can trust it, but I know that But I know that Sawyer obviously will make sure that you don't get hurt. And then
I will say Kate is like stopping becoming a character at this point.
She's literally
I'm gonna go here and I exist for Sawyer to have a moral quandering
she
about
really
whether to
has
stay
become
or not.
device. It's really the worst case of a Damon Lindelof character trapped inside of a J.J. Abrams character trapped inside of a Damon Lindelof show. I love how too that they're like, yeah, we're not gonna let Miles have a gun because Miles is just too angry, and he just there's a really funny bit of banter later when they meet up with Hurley, and Hurley's like, oh great, the island sent us they sent us another Sawyer. I thought that was really fun. I'm like, oh, we're getting self-referential now. We're that far into the show now.
Or even he says like, oh, Locke told me said that Walt told him to do that, and Sayid's like, Walt, dude, don't even ask.
Don't even ask. It was great.
Like he knows that. Okay,
he knows.
But
yeah,
the island is just. Locke is all the way off the rails.
Yeah,
he's off the reservation.
So it's funny because that actually kind of dovetails with one point that I forgot to bring up. We were kind of covering last week in a little bit of rapid fire pace, which is that famously when Locke drops to the group that he's basically leading them to Jacob's cabin, he mentions the cabin. Hurley casually mentions, oh, but we passed it. I thought it was back that way, and that catches both Locke and Ben's attention because they're like, wait a minute. Hurley saw the cabin. So obviously they're worried about it for two different reasons. Yeah. Locke is just confused because he's like, wait, like the cabin, Hurley saw the cabin. Okay. So it's funny because even though Locke and Ben obviously like kind of hate each other at this point, they're more similar than they realize because they both are kind of have this attachment to the cabin and this attachment to Jacob because it makes them like kind of feel special and like the guy in charge, the important guy, but for diametrically different reasons or maybe more similar reasons than we know. Obviously, we know kind of Ben's tragic history of, being brought to the island against his will and his dad kind of, blaming him for his mom's death and that leading Ben to basically wipe out Dharma and ally himself with the others and eventually manipulate his way to the top. But Locke, obviously, we also know that it ties into his feelings of worthlessness and the fact that his life didn't really mean anything. And again, we're kind of seeing even more so now, again, it's the greatest thing about the show, the fact that it is character-based. We're kind of seeing now how each and every one of these characters are now that they're finally the closest to being rescued that they have been the entire show, are kind of all having this like reckoning with like, oh, like we've kind of now been on this island for so long, we're so used to it.
Yeah.
Do we even want to leave? What's even waiting for us back in the real world? You know, as is seen later on when what's it called? After they make it to the barracks and they set the trap for them, where Sayid, Kate, and Miles make it to the barracks. They find Hurley tied up in the cabin because Hurley's questioning Locke before, when Locke is basically saying that when Hurley suggests that they should let Charlotte go, Locke denies him and is basically kind of taking authoritarian charge. And so Hurley pulls a switcheroo where they think that he's been tied up and left by Locke's group, when in reality he was just left there as a trap in order for them to ambush them. Kate gets thrown in a room with Sawyer. Sawyer is like, I don't want to leave. Like, what do I have to go back to? You know, there's food, there's running water. Now that we know that there's like basically like civilization here, we've taken care of the others. Like, what is there to go back to in the real world? And based off of what we know about Sawyer in the real world, it kind of makes a compelling case. It even tells Kate, he's like, weren't you on the run? And aren't you just going to be arrested the minute you get back to the real world? And so we're kind of getting into like the dichotomy and psychology of why everybody that is in Locke's group wants to stay. We know that Hurley obviously went there because he was sad about what happened with Charlie, obviously, and felt that Charlie died for nothing in order to try and alert this boat that may or may not want to help them. But in reality, it's very interesting also that to me is kind of like the focus of this episode, is getting into the psychology of the characters. You know, now that they have a chance to leave, the question is, do they want to leave? And also continuing the plot where Sayid gets thrown in with Ben. Locke comes to interrogate them, you know, apologizes for how they treated them. And you have this like interesting moment where Sayid once again is kind of, you know, showing how he's like kind of the intermediary. We get another funny, really funny Ben one-liner here where he's like, I lost $1 betting John you wouldn't be stupid enough to fall for your friend as bait. It's like that. Ben is just like having heaters just every single episode. Low-key, he might be the MVP of this season. But Sayid basically tells Locke to give them Charlotte because basically saying that he agrees with them that the boat crew are liars and not there to rescue them. But if he returns with Charlotte safely, he can secure a ride to the boat and find out what's going on. Locke tells Sayid that that he'll save him time by telling him about Ben spying the boat. Sayid asks him who it is. Ben refuses to tell. And so basically Sayid says that this is a waste of time, that he wouldn't trust Ben, anything that Ben would say, even if he was telling the truth. But basically that Locke has to give him Charlotte, or there's going to be a war that they won't be in any position to stop. And basically Locke refuses until Sayid says that he has something to trade. We don't know what that is. So what are you thinking of this whole interaction that's going on here? Basically how Sayid is basically, for lack of a better word, playing the little finger here between Jack and Locke's Rob Catelyn Stark and the Lannisters here, if we're talking season 2 era of Game of Thrones.
I think that's just a sign of great TV when we're pulling out early Game of Thrones comparisons, because it is kind of that. It's everyone kind of wants what's best for the group, but ultimately everyone is also a little bit selfish. They want to get off the island, or they want to stay on the island. Sayid wants to. He sees through the bullshit. He knows that these people aren't here for them. They're here for something bigger, or Ben. So they say.
Right.
So again, it's this thing of like, we both have like doubts about these people, even though we are opposed. So at least we can agree. We can't agree on this, but we can agree on this. So again, that was a really good scene. So what was the deal he made? Like he left them Kate or Miles or something?
So Kate chose to stay. That's the thing. Kate chose to stay. But basically, but it's that he left them. He gave them Miles in exchange for Charlotte. So they go back with Charlotte, but they leave them Miles. And meanwhile,
can't imagine Miles was too.
Yeah.
Too
well, as Lupita says later on, it's like, well, Miles is a pain in my ass anyway. So
again, reaffirming that Lupita is already like a top 5 character.
Top 5 character of the whole show. Yeah. And also, you have a great moment later on where he's talking with Jack at the helicopter, and he's like, so did the Sox really win the World Series? And Lupita's like, don't even get me started on that. All right. My dad's from the Bronx. I'm Yankee Blues. That was just a great character moment right there. But that also, like I said, the other very, very important piece, and again, it's existing almost as background noise, but it's very, very important, where you have like kind of back at the helicopter where they're waiting for Sayid to go off. You have Jack kind of waiting with Lapidus, and Daniel's off like putzing around with some equipment that he just pulled from the helicopter. And Jack's looking over being like, what the hell is he doing? Julia and Desmond arrive back. Desmond angrily is interrogating Lapidus about the picture, but Lapidus is being very, very coy and non-informative. So Desmond basically demands, he's like, listen, when that helicopter takes off, I'm on it because I'm getting answers. And so basically But like I said, that's the other thing that really, really differentiates. You're saying that, like, man, they are hitting us over the head with those time travel hits because
So
basically,
now it's like,
yeah,
so the first part is the whoever's on the boat says like, oh yeah, 10 kilometers, 5 kilometers, and then there's nothing. And then it shows up like an hour later, and the
right.
times don't match. So
Yep.
the island
Time
is moving.
discrepancies right there.
There's
Your
time
time travel
dilation on
brain
the
is immediately
island,
going on like, okay, what's
but they're
going on
also
here?
communicating in real time. So I don't know. My sci-fi brain is fried
Yeah.
from these new pieces of evidence.
Like
So
I said, it's everything at once. It's both scientific and mystical in nature. This truly is the Occam's rainbow, I think is what it's called. The intersectionality of mysticism and science, which is something already very, very difficult to pull off, and usually kind of gets a little bit frowned upon by the critical, by the critical community. But in this instance, and part of me has a sneaky suspicion that that's the real reason why so many fans were turned off initially, is because that's ultimately what is going on here. Where you have, obviously, again, there's already been a lot of hints that what's happening on the island is supernatural based. The black smoke monster, Jacob's cabin, kind of magically popping around at different locations. But it is also very interesting that only 2 episodes after Hurley was kind of running into Jacob's cabin nonstop and just kind of kept popping up in front of him, that Daniel basically performs an experiment that proves that there is some kind of time discrepancy going on between where the boat is offshore and the island itself. Because I don't remember. Do you remember like the exact like time difference? It was like 3 something.
I think it was.
Like 2
I think on his island timer it was like 2:40 something, and on the rocket timer it was like 3 something. So
yeah, so it's like
basically there is a discrepancy.
There is a very big time
needed.
discrepancy that's going on here. Yeah, and like I said, that is very much into that. But before they can really confirm anything, Sayid returns with Charlotte.
Maybe the island is on like a, I don't know, like a inflatable thing that's just swimming around the ocean.
Listen,
like,
all
I don't
I'm
know,
say is, if you
like a big floaty or something.
If you thought that the last couple of season finales were insane, just you wait until this season finale. You ain't seen nothing yet. But that leads us to kind of our twist ending. So like I said, so Sayid returns with Charlotte. Lapidus is like, oh, you left Miles? Well, good thing he was a pain in the ass. So they kind of just wrote that one off as being like, okay, like nobody really likes Miles anyway. So he offers Charlotte and Daniel rides back to the boat. They decide that they are going to stay there. Jack wishes Sayid good luck. The helicopter takes off with obviously Sayid, Desmond, Lapidus piloting, and what's it called? And then Naomi's body. So they are finally heading off to the boat. They're going to get answers. And then we get the final bit in Sayid's flash forward where he's going to meet up whoever his secretive employer is after he's just survived getting shot. And it's revealed to be none other than Ben Linus. So Ben also is revealed to have gotten off the island somehow and basically has been recruiting Sayid to basically take down whoever the shadow organization. So this tells me a couple things. Obviously, again, me knowing what happens, but I'm talking about like at this point in the show, like me pretending like I didn't know anything. This tells me a couple things. One, there may have been other people that got off the island because there's no way in hell that Ben is a part of the Oceanic 6. No way. And because obviously also because he wasn't on Oceanic Flight 815. And as far as the real world is concerned, he doesn't exist, considering that when Sayid also was inspecting his bunker, his house in the barracks, he found a bunch of money and passports. Again, very James Bond, very Jason Bourne-esque in his desk. So that leads me to believe that Ben has also, been going back and forth from the island, obviously, with the submarine and such in the past, which now no longer exists.
I'm thinking we're yet to see like the true reach of Ben Linus and what he's been doing before the plane crashed, essentially. So,
exactly.
So there's still some things to be revealed there.
But also, again, showing that, again, very much tying together the stuff, still very much a connection between what's on the island and off the island, where Sayid says that, like, oh, I would never trust somebody like Ben. But now off the island, he's working for him. So something happened where either Ben was pulling his usual manipulative shit or something in real time happened that caused Sayid to trust, that frightened Sayid, I guess you should say, enough to make him trust somebody as duplicitous as Ben. So, again, another just gangbusters, just leaving us wanting more. Trying to figure out how
it keeps raising the expectation of whatever is going to happen.
Raising it, exactly. It once again verified that this is my favorite season of the show. Oh man, just
I can't imagine what the hell happens in 5 and 6. Like
man.
if this is what's happening in 4, what do they have left?
Like I said, they pulled the greatest turnaround in TV history with the transition from the first 3 seasons to the last 3 seasons. And now you see why I kept saying as we were recapping the first 3 seasons that like this really was the first era of the show, and now we were in the new era of the show. Like I said, the reason why the first episode of this season was called the beginning of the end is because it in a way acted as, you remember how the first episode of Community season 5 when Dan Harmon came back?
I do not.
So basically, when Community season 5, for all the Community fans out there, famously know Dan Harmon is fired after season 3. He is not there for season 4. Season 4 is very critically despised. They shortened that season as well. It's only 13 episodes. They air it all in the spring. Famously, the cast was very, very dissatisfied. They did not like the new showrunners. NBC brings back Dan Harmon for season 5. But season 5, by that point, Jeff has already graduated from Greendale and is forced to kind of come back with his tail between his legs after his law degree didn't work out. He reunites with everybody. But there's kind of this open acknowledgement because Community also was always very self-referential and meta. That was part of its tone. There was this kind of open acknowledgement and a lot of self-referentials by the cast that like things were moving on and that the show would like kind of taken on a new form. You know, Donald Glover famously left the show after only 5 episodes. Chevy Chase was finally let go from the show. There were several new cast members. Jonathan Banks joined. So it very much felt like it was an open acknowledgement that the show was kind of taking on a new era in order to keep going. And it's kind of a similar thing with Lost, where even though it's still the show that we know, between the flash forwards, the new very fast-paced nature of the show, and the fact that you now have all of these seeds that are just mounting on top of each other in order to continue to increase the mystery and really just changing the mystery, where now we're not so much concerned about what the island is and what's going on it. Now we're more so concerned with getting rescued, but also who is there to rescue us and what the hell is happening and what the hell happened in between the Oceanics is getting off the island and everything that's happening now. So all of that and more as we continue to recap this show over the next couple of weeks. So next week's episode is Eggtown, which is the Kate-centered episode, and then the final episode of February, like I said, the one that I have been hyping up since we started the show.
The one that influenced every high concept show
afterwards. The Constant. The greatest episode of Lost and The Ringer's #1 greatest episode of television of the 21st century, beating out episodes like Pine Barrens from The Sopranos, Ozymandias from Breaking Bad, Middle Ground from The Wire, the Red Wedding episode, Reigns of Castamere from Game of Thrones, several other episodes. So that will be the end of February, and you will see what I'm talking about when we get to that. But anything else you want to talk about before we get out of here?
No, I guess it's just that I'm not that worried about like if it goes too sci-fi. Like I can live with that as long as the characters still have agency and they're not making decisions that go against their characters. That's what happened in Game of Thrones. Like people just started not being themselves, or they were rushing arcs. Stranger Things, they completely just lost their agency. But Lost is clearly like everyone, the characters are making the plot. Yes. I mean, everything happens because someone makes a split-second decision, or someone makes the wrong decision, like Locke not pushing the button at the end of season 2. Everything that happened in the last finale. So go as crazy sci-fi because you have to at this point. Like you have to keep escalating with this kind of thing. So I have no idea where it's going to go, except that there's going to be some time travel, like you said, whatever that happens at the end of this season. So
yeah, absolutely.
I have no idea.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. But like I said, really good episode. I had fun with this one. I'm excited to see kind of, recap with myself where it goes next week and beyond. So with that being said, Luke, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
They can follow me at Luke Reviews on YouTube.
All right.
I've been doing other stuff.
All right.
So that has taken backseat.
Well, we shall like I said, we shall see. I'm still waiting for that top 10 list.
Well, before the Oscars, like if the Oscars can take until March, then I can take until
that's true. That is very
the
true.
end of February.
Yeah, and besides, we always know that like January and February is always just like kind of catch up for the end of the year. But like I said, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can follow me with everything going on at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms, at Official Talk TV Podcast across all platforms. And if you're listening to us on Spotify, be sure to stay tuned to our recap of the Super Bowl, which will be taking place right after this. But in the meantime, people, 12 seasons of a short film, and get lost. We'll see you guys next week.